Very hard times. And if anyone else wants to tell you any differently, they're not telling the truth at all. It's just like, oh my goodness, can I possibly do this for another minute? I think it was a bit more significant to me is because I was caring for my mother, who meant a lot to me in my life. My name's Miriam Cleary, and I'm an Aboriginal woman from Northern Territory. My mother's side is Gurindji from Wave Hill, and my father's is Eastern Aranda from Alice Springs. I live up in Darwin with my husband and our family, our children, and we have grandchildren.
And is that a picture of your mum?
Yes.
And so you're here to tell us about her journey with dementia to some degree and your experience caring for her. Why is that important for you to do?
Well, going through that caring for my mum and knowing how, not difficult, but extremely hard it was to be able to do that, and I actually made it through, that I'd like to be able to get that message out to others. And I really firmly believe that information, education, awareness is the key to helping others in the community, individuals and families alike.
Was it daunting for you as a family to go through a dementia experience?
Absolutely. And if anyone else wants to tell you any differently, they're not telling the truth at all. Very hard times, very precious times and moments that if you have a chance to just stop and realise that they are the most precious moments, some of those moments are just awesome. Other times it's just like, oh my goodness, can I possibly do this for another minute, another second of the day? And I certainly learnt a lot from being a carer, and I think it was a bit more significant to me is because I was caring for my mother, who meant a lot to me in my life. Yes.
Tell us a bit about your mom. Let's get to know her a bit. Tell us what she was like.
Mum knew how to show love. It was important to her for us to know what respect was, what discipline was, morals and ethics, and believe in ourselves. And family was just everything to Mum, absolutely everything. She gave up a lot for us, but she didn't. It never seemed that way that she did. She was always happy and always very positive, even when things were amazingly challenging. She would still have a smile on her face and go, come on, let's get together and have a barbecue or what have you. And that's what held our family together. It was great, yeah. And growing up as children, it was just wonderful. Mum was the one who taught me a lot about native plants and animals, and so too did my dad. But Mum was there to encourage many of those steps forward in knowing our environment and being comfortable in it. And I was grateful that she had done that, or was able to, for herself. You know, education was important, and particularly with our background being Aboriginal people. Statistics show that Aboriginal people have less opportunity for education, housing, all those sorts of things. The list goes on. Yeah. So Mum did all that she could to provide all those things for us and encouraged us.
A lot of people who were part of the stolen generations have had lifelong difficulty with authorities and institutions and even professions. What was your mum's relationship like with doctors and the health system? Because obviously with a dementia diagnosis, she would have had to interact a huge amount with that. What was the dynamic?
There was one incident where she came out home. We lived out at Darwin River, which is a rural area of Darwin. It's about 50 minutes from the Darwin city. Anyhow, we were out there, and Mum came to visit us one day with my niece, and we had a wonderful day. And then she got in the car and she says to me, "Hey, Mim, when I get to the main highway, which way do I turn?" I went, "Oh, okay." And I explained to her. The very next day, I went around. I took the day off from work. I worked with Stolen Generations at the time. I went around to see Mum, and I said, "Hey, Mum, are you due for your general checkup soon with the doctor?" And she said, "Oh, yes, I think I am." I said, "Hey, how about I give your doctor a call and we can go around and get that done?" And she said, "Yeah, all right, that's no worries." And so what I did, I said, "Do you mind if I ring up and book that appointment?" And she said, "Yeah, of course." So when I rang, Mum already had a very good relationship with her doctor, her GP, and it was a lady, and she was around Mum's age. So I think that had a significant difference for Mum, for be able to, talk to her about things. And they had a good rapport with each other. I know now I was pretty blessed with that situation, getting Mum to the doctor and for them to do those cognitive tests. But once that happened, they referred Mum over to the specialist, over to the memory service. Then that became a challenge. Everywhere else was a challenge because they were new people. She didn't know them. Even though it was in the earlier stages of dementia, she still didn't trust. There was no trust there for hospital staff, for anyone working in that area. So she insisted that I be with her and or my brother or my sister or my husband. She just said, "Mim, you have to be there for me." And that went all the way until her very last breath. I had to be there for her, which was very challenging for me, confronting. But it was obvious that I was the one that had to do that, left to do that. And just looking back now, I wouldn't have it any other way.
So how did the wider family respond to your mum living with dementia? What was the dynamic?
It was...
You're shaking your head at me like, why are we going here?
Oh, it was a very trying time, extremely. And because people react differently to different situations, some are fearful, some want to know more and do research, others just don't want to have anything to do with it. And I think it's important to note that sometimes you can struggle with that if you're the primary carer, and until you take a moment to understand that people do react differently and they have different capabilities in situations like that, and they have different skills and their emotions are different too.
It can be quite hard to accept that.
Absolutely. It took me a long time, but until I did, I was fine. It's like, and I shouldn't say this, but it's like if you're a first respondent and you've seen a car accident. Not everyone, there's 5 people in the car. Not everyone's going to run to the scene to help. Some people may freeze. Some people might get on the phone and call emergency services.
Everyone's different.
Yes, everyone's different. And I felt if I had that approach to things, then I know that one of the family members might be really good at doing the budgeting side for Mum. Another person might be good at, enjoying walks with Mum. someone might be interested in helping out with the medications. All those sorts of things. We all have a role to play. So that goes back to, yes, I'm the former carer, but it takes more than just me to look after our loved one, our mum.
How did the kids cope? Because there's grandkids as well in the scene.
My children lived at home, the last three, and it was really difficult for them. At first, oh great, Nana's coming to live with us, and because Mum interacted with them in a different way in the early stages and prior to having her dementia diagnosis. As Mum's dementia progressed, it became harder for everyone. Mum became a bit aggressive. Well, she was aggressive. And incidents happened along the way. But then there was some really wonderful moments that Mum would be calm and very gentle to the children and understanding to that extent.
Can you tell me about what happened in the pool?
Yeah. From the front of the house is a veranda that opens out and then into the pool. And the children were playing and Nana decided that it was time for them to get out. And they decided, no, it's not time, Nana. Nana, we're not ready to get out. And, my mum decided to get a few heavy objects and throw it at the children. And they were fearful of that. So
sounds like a very good tactic.
What were they saying?
Oh, they were just saying, "Hey, Nana, what are you doing? It's okay." And they were trying to calm her down. It didn't work. And then eventually myself and my husband came out and calmed Mum down. Distracted her. Distraction was a very good thing.
Yes.
You use that a lot as a tool. And so Mum and I went inside the house. But that night the children reacted. They locked their doors because they were concerned that Nan would come in. And knowing that Mum was just a most beautiful, amazing person, but her personality was changing dramatically. And so we had to, and I sat with my husband and I said, look, what are we going to do here? And there were other incidents, of course, too, and many, many more. But I said, what are we going to do here? So we decided to ring Dementia Australia, actually, and they were very supportive and had some hints and tips and all those sorts of things that helped us along the way.
They had a PDF on grandmothers throwing things into the pool.
No, calming situations.
They've usually got a PDF on everything. We must tell them.
Yes, that was an incident, absolutely. But no, they were very supportive. But what helped us with Mum staying an additional 8 months is there's a wonderful trainer at Dementia Australia, and he was able to have just a short time with the children, a few hours, and had Eddie, which is our training tool, and it simulates what it's like to have a person having dementia. And
how old were the children at this age?
I'd say the youngest would have been about 4 or 5.
Wow, that would have been fascinating for them to see.
Yes. And it was great that information came to them when it was needed.
Yeah.
And anyhow, it helped them, We got home and Mum was, like I said, she was able to stay for about another 8 months before she went into residential care. And of course, I would always have that support from Dementia Australia, but I also had that support from the memory service, and that helped from my family and from the community. So, but navigating that system is ridiculous.
Very hard.
There was a transition to residential care for your mum. What was that like?
I said we were going to visit someone and go and ask someone about, if there's a room there that, because it was respite. and would you like to have just a small holiday? And I'll come and visit you. And she said, oh, I don't really want a holiday. I want to stay with you. And I said, well, you know, you might enjoy it. Let's just go and have a look. So we went through the front door, and as we're coming up the hall, she starts thinking, no, I'm not going in this place. Because it was very clinical, you know, it just doesn't look like
Your home.
a home, yes. And in any case, we got up there, and it was difficult for me because remembering now, I was, you know, trying to hold back the tears and all that sort of stuff because it's, yeah.
It must have been so traumatic for you, you know, when you've got to go to that step of actually placing somebody into that care. It must be so hard.
Yes, it was, especially when, you know, you go through that guilt and you get riddled with it.
Yeah.
And I didn't say that. I've heard it said before, but by family members that, no, we have to look after Mum. She has to stay at home. There's no way she's going into a home. But sometimes you realise that you're unable to do that. And so it came a time where I realised I couldn't do that, and neither could my family. So we took Mum there, and that was the turning point. When I left, I was bawling my eyes out, and I felt like the worst daughter in the world. My husband was wonderful and amazing. He would often provide counselling for me. I know that wasn't really the right thing to do, but that's how it was at the time. And I would visit quite a lot. And that meant breakfast. That meant lunch and dinner.
That was a lot.
And sometimes sleeping. A lot of things happened within the residential setting. Mum often said, you know, there's too many men in this area. I only want to be with the women, and I only want women to touch me. I don't want the men to touch me. And culturally, it's not appropriate. But even though we, you know, you complete the personal care form and things like that, I don't think people really read those things, the residential carers. And I would like to see them really look at the care plan and know the person well enough to know that they don't like Vegemite on their toast. They prefer jam. You know, those simple things that make life so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And easier. Yeah.
What's the cultural view of putting a parent into aged care within Indigenous culture?
Well, I know within my family structure you don't do it. And usually it's the oldest child, the older sibling, that is responsible for these things to happen. Mum being a female, of course, there had to be one of the sisters or the daughters to look after her. And so originally it started off with my younger sister looking after Mum, and then it went on to onto me. And so it had to be one of us girls to look after Mum. Our brother could not look after Mum the way that we are expected to. I know it's different for different families, but this was how we were structured and taught.
When you say you don't do it, what's the perception then socially and culturally if you do? If you are in a situation where you do need to take that step?
You're criticised, and the criticism comes mostly from your family, and it's soul-destroying and damaging. And it was very hard for me to cope on a daily basis with that extra criticism and judgment. It was extremely soul-destroying. And like I said, I can't believe I'm here today to tell the story. I'm glad I am.
We're glad you are too.
Yes.
Do you believe in hindsight that it was the right thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it was time. There's ages and stages, and Mum was at that stage where she needed that type of help and support, which I could not give her. I couldn't give her that.
It's in her interest, right?
Yes, yes.
I know she didn't like hospitals at all. She had a fall in the care home and hurt her hip.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that. What happened?
Mum was taken to the hospital, and I think they actually got me on the phone. When they were talking to me, they said, I said, "Can you please put my mum on? I want to talk to my mum." And they said, "Yes, okay." And I said, "Mum, how are you feeling?" She goes, "I'm in pain. It hurts. I said, "Okay." And she goes, come here. And I said, "I can't. I have to see you at the hospital." "No, I don't want these people touching me." And I said, I said, "I will meet you at the hospital. I promise, Mum, I'll be there." And then they took the phone off her because she was in a state where she couldn't calm down. She was frightened. She was angry, and she was quite violent. But when I got there, knowing who I was, she did know who I was. She started calming down, yeah. In any case, we got her up to the room and she was settled in. That night, I don't know whether it was a temperature change or drop or what it was, but Mum woke up and she was awake, but she was saying, run, hide, don't let them catch you, but she was screaming this out. And I was listening to her and I was thinking, oh, I wonder why she's going through that, wonder why she's saying those things. And she kept repeating that. And then she grabbed me and then she was holding me really, really tight, like pressing into my arm and trying to pull me down to hide. And it took a little while, like a couple of seconds, to think, hang on, I've heard this story before. And they say that people that are living with dementia do go back to their past memories, and that moment, and Mum was living it, and it was so vivid.
Oh God, yeah.
It was like I was with her and experiencing that in that particular time. And it just blew my mind. I thought, oh my goodness, this is what's happening. Mum's reliving when she was stolen when she was 4 years old. And it was a very significant event for Mum and for myself.
That would have been so hard for you to watch.
Yes, it was. And I think being in a hospital setting too, because it's an institution in itself, I don't know what triggered Mum. I don't know. Like I said, it might be the temperature, drop in temperature. It might have been that she woke up and she thought, oh, where am I, sort of thing, very clinical situation, atmosphere, all that sort of stuff. Oh, hang on, I'm lonely. Where's my family? And we knew all the stories. So that's how I could identify, hey, this is what's happening. This is the story.
You obviously learnt a huge amount through this period with your mum. And as you mentioned, there's lots of different cultural perceptions, viewpoints, and even obligations for family. Have you found yourself now being able to kind of share that knowledge and understanding? These sound like tricky conversations to be having. So are you doing that?
Yes, to the best of my ability. Some days it depends on who I'm speaking with. And if I've met them before. If they're complete strangers, it's hard to have that rapport with people. In a large setting, it's difficult. In a one-on-one or a tight family group, it's a lot easier. But I'm trying. I feel that if I share my story, people are more willing and more relaxed to share theirs. I think embarrassment, is one of the main reasons why people don't want to share their story.
What's the embarrassment? That someone has got dementia, or the way it's responded to
It's
by the
still
family.
so stigmatised,
Yes,
isn't it?
it is. Yeah. And particularly when you come from a background where you don't normally talk about it, I understood. I completely understood why some people take a step back, because they can't deal with it themselves, within themselves. It's purely something that they have to deal with. It's not what I'm doing, and wasn't what my mum was doing. And so with why I believe that awareness, information and education is so important. Once we all start talking about it openly, it becomes a lot easier for families and people living with dementia.
So do you have practical advice, tips, suggestions that you give people?
I think first and foremost you need to take a couple of big deep breaths. Yeah, because that information is new and it's
Overwhelming.
Yes, and then if you're able to sit down and talk to family members and your loved one about the situation and how you're going to do things or how they want us to do things. Are you a carer? You need to ask yourself that. So I had to ask myself, am I a carer? Can I do this? I had 4 children. I have grandchildren. I know how to be loving, gentle, caring, considerate, all those things. So can I apply that to my mum and show her respectfully how I can care for her? My answer was yes. What that looked like, I wasn't sure. What was involved, I wasn't completely sure. So I felt I had to reach out and find out a lot more about what dementia was about. The other thing is, I think you need to look at is whether you have the skills to care for someone else. Because you would do a better job if you know that you have some of those skills. But if you don't have those skills, you still can be a good carer because you can do other things that will help them and support them. You don't have to be able to be the one that showers the person. You don't have to be the one that takes them out for dinner or prepare the dinner. You might not know how to cook. There are other family members that know how to do those things.
You now work with Dementia Australia. What's your job involved? What are you doing?
Well, working with family and community, my priority is working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But I just love being out in the community, speaking to people and listening. Listening is really important. And I find that if I listen more than I am talking, I learn a lot more and I'm able to... it's just about helping others. I remember being in that situation. I truly do. And I know how challenging it was. Every day, every minute, every second of the day. And it consumes you as a carer. That's all you're thinking of. How can I do something better? I hope that I'm helping others in the community with that. Whether it be referrals, whether it be navigating the system and helping them, whether it be just sitting there and having a cup of tea. And that's so important to do, is just to slow it all down and talk through things and know that you're not alone. There's so many people that have experienced what we have as a carer and they're going through it right now. And it's good to know that, you're not alone. It really is.
You've got a picture of your mum here today. Why?
Mum's always with me, and she's my elder. So, Hamish, I'm trying to hold back the tears now. It's because she's always been a mentor. I looked up to her for knowledge, hope, respect, all those things, and she had given it to me. And I believe that she still does that today. It's just a cute reminder. Yeah.
What's the bit of knowledge that you think of when you think of your mum?
It's not only her knowledge that she learnt along the way and that she gathered from her families and others in her circumstances with the stolen generations, but it's also what she taught us, strong morals and ethics, and they provide a path for the decisions that you make in your life. And I think that's, when I think of my mum, that's what I think of, to still be a good person. And the knowledge she had and the experiences she gave me along the way is what I'm going to use in my everyday life, and that includes my work life too. Yeah.
That's her legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Passing down that knowledge to our children, grandchildren and so forth. Lucky enough for great-grandchildren. Yeah.
Miriam, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.